For the first time in the history of the G20, we prepared a full report of our activities with emerging markets and countries with lower levels of income. So the G20 also achieved quite a lot in the area of assisting the emergent countries and developing countries. We defined 5 priorities of the G20 group.
Это обеспечение продовольственной безопасности, расширение доступа к финансовым услугам и повышение уровня финансовой грамотности.
Food safety, the access to financial markets, and the development of modern infrastructure, including energy infrastructure and training of local personnel, and ensuring access for developing countries to world resources. We have to ensure that transparency and predictability of raw materials and energy markets. We have to stimulate the so-called green growth. And we also have to work hard to ensure that climate change is avoided. The regulation of the energy market is very important for G20. The fight against corruption and the prevention of corruption is equally important for us. These questions were discussed during our summit, and a few proposals were put forward, especially by Russia in this area. One of the important questions that we discussed is the prevention of corruption into infrastructure and development projects connected to international sport events such as Olympic sports or World Championships. We hope that our proposals will be efficient in fighting the cases of corruption. I want to thank all my colleagues once again for constructive, productive and efficient work. I'm sure that all of the decisions that we managed to adopt and agree will be implemented into life, and our cooperation in this summit will be a good example of how to cooperate on an international level for the benefit of every nation in the world. We hope that this will improve the quality of life of people in the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, we also had a meeting regarding the leaders of the BRICS group of countries. We discussed the global economic development as well. We managed to discuss in detail our cooperation between the 5 countries of the BRICS group. Now, I can say that it's a 40% of global population. It's the biggest international market in the world. 17% of international trade in the world, almost 1/3 of GDP in the entire world is 5 countries of BRICS. For Russia, it's very important to be a part of such a group. We shared a few ideas and we discussed a few proposals. For us, it's very important, as the adoption of mutual documents is important. One of the important directions of the future development is the reform of the International Monetary Fund. We have to ensure that redistribution of quotas is finished as soon as possible. We also decided to create the so-called BRICS Bank. We already put forward a few suggestions about the capital of this bank, which will be $50 billion. We discussed how to ensure the joint adoption of the consensus adoption. We also discussed the hard currency reserves for the future BRICS Bank. We decided on the quotas of every country that's putting into BRICS in the joint financial pool. This amount will come to $100 billion. Russia's share will be $18 billion. So it will help us to sustain the financial stability which is, as we know, the financial market can be unpredictable. So we gave our instructions to ministers of finance to discuss the most important issues that will arise in the future summit in Brazil next year. And of course, I want to thank again all of our partners for the fruitful discussions, and I'm sure that all of the decisions will be important in the development of the BRICS bloc. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Now let's have your questions. Let's try to avoid long questions, otherwise we'll be here late at night.
Спасибо, Владимир Владимирович, за возможность задать вопрос. Владимир Владимирович, в Чеченской Республике
Thank you for the opportunity to put questions to you. It's questions from the Chechen journalist.
Социальная сфера, но вместе с тем остается вопрос промышленности, создания рабочих мест.
Mr. Putin, it's thanks to your support that Chechnya is being rebuilt. The citizen villages in the Republic are being rebuilt. But we still see that the oil industry in Chechnya, one of the most important industries that we have, its development. And its development and the infrastructural modernization is very slow. So for us, it's crucial. Unemployment in the Republic is also very important. Also now there are some reminiscence of the Second World War. I remind you that during the Second World War, the battle for Grozny, our capital, was so crucial for the entire battle of the Caucasus. My question is, though, can you, Mr. President, ensure that the city of Grozny is awarded with the honorary title of the city of military heroism?
Войнахи вообще и чеченцы, и ингуши очень много сделали для победы в Великой Отечественной войне. Вели себя исключительно.
Well, I want to say that both the Chechens and the Balkan people, and the English people contributed a lot to the victories in the Second World War, and this fact is well known and documented. We have to see that the Chechens are a heroic people. It's their mentality. As to your questions of the status of the city of Grozny, again, I can see that you want to award the title of military glory. Well, I can't influence this decision, but the very fact that you're putting forward such a proposal and that it's being discussed is important. As for your question about the development of oil industries in Grozny, well, yes, we did discuss energy questions during the G20 summit, but there are global issues. So we weren't discussing the question about building a new oil refinery per se, so perhaps this is a question for the Chechen leadership, not the Russian leadership or an international body like G20. So I'll probably discuss it on a military level with the ministers in Russia.
Владимир Владимирович, наверное, без преувеличения можно сказать, что тень Сирии нависала над нынешним саммитом G20.
Without any exaggeration, we can say that the shadow of Syria was a very dark cloud during the summit. While there were probably concessions in the questions of economic issues, but we can also say that the Syrian issue is quite divisive and there's been no consensus. Can you tell us whether the disagreement on the Syrian question has influenced the economic questions and discussions? Well, I can say what's happening in Syria now is very seriously affecting the development of economy and even the global economy, not just in a regional basis. We know that conflicts in the Middle East are taking place, and the price of energy resources like oil, they rocket off the back of this. We have to say at a time when the global economy is suffering from general crisis, it's not really wise to provoke a new crisis in the Middle East area. Yesterday night we spent a lot of time discussing the Syrian problem, the Syrian issue. We finished probably way after midnight, and then we had a bilateral meeting and discussed with the British Prime Minister, David Cameron. You say that it's a 50-50 division between the G20 members and on the Syrian question. It's not exactly true. I can say that the USA, France, Turkey, Canada and Saudi Arabia are in favour of some sort of military action, and the UK Prime Minister David Cameron is in favour of such an action, but the United Kingdom Parliament is against this. Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, is very, very cautious. And now I can say who are categorically against Russia, China, India, Indonesia. And I have to underline that that is the most populous Muslim country in the world. Argentina, Italy, South Africa categorically are against any military interaction. Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the General Secretary of the UN, is against any kind of military strike. And let's not forget about the appeal from the Pope Francis, who is again against any military intervention. He wants to ensure that there is a peaceful solution to the military question in Syria. I can even say in the countries where the leadership are in favour of a military strike, the vast majority of the population are against any kind of military involvement. Even in the United States, 60 to 70% of the population are against the war. I mentioned this many times before, and I want to repeat it now. Whatever happened with the so-called chemical weapons attack was a provocation from the opposition fighters, from terrorists and rebels, who want to ensure the support of the countries who oppose the Assad regime. So again, I will say it's a provocation. On the other hand, I have to remind you that any international intervention, it should be sanctioned by the United Nations, or when the country is acting in self-defense. We know that the United States is not acting in self-defense against Syria because Syria is not attacking the US.
Владимир Владимирович, газета «Известия», Егор Сазаев-Горев.
А США здесь при чем?
США про отношения.
Я думал, что вы из США сами.
Нет, это такая хитрость.
Вы из США. Окей.
Хотел у вас спросить, в итоге получилось ли вам встретиться с Бараком Обамой, хотя встреча не планировалась, но, может быть, на ногах, неформальной обстановке. И у многих экспертов и журналистов складывается мнение, что...
Mr. Putin, is there a chance that you had a one-on-one meeting with President Obama, and are there any significant disagreements between... Any significant personal disagreements within yourselves? Obviously, there are some disagreements between policy, but on a personal relationship, what is that like? How would you describe it? Well, yes, I met with President Obama. We weren't standing, we were sitting. Maybe we were talking between 20 and 30 minutes, but it was a very detailed and interesting conversation and mutually amicable discussion. And we actually stood our ground, and that is, of course, the way that it's going to be.